This morning I'm in Saint-Hilaire-le-Grand, a small commune of around 400 people that's in the Marne department of northeastern France near Mourmelon. I'm here today because there's a remarkable story to be told about a very little known participant on the Western Front during the Great War, and that is the Russian Expeditionary Force. It was in December of 1915 that the French politician Paul Doumer, while he was on a visit to Russia, he proposed that 300,000 Russian troops be sent to fight in France in exchange for French weapons and munitions. The Russian High Command opposed the idea, but Tsar Nicholas II supported it. And so General Alexeyev, the Russian Chief of Staff, starting in August of 1915, made an offer to send some Russian troops to France, as long as they remained under Russian officers while operating under the French High Command. They also required that the French Navy transport those soldiers. And so it was that the first Russian Special Brigade was formed in January of 1916 under the command of General Nikolai Alexandrovich Levitsky. It was made up mostly of draftees from the various reserve units that were incorporated into these newly formed 1st and 2nd regiments from Moscow and from Samara. The 1st regiment was mostly made up of conscripted factory workers, and the 2nd was drawn more from farmers in rural areas. That special brigade totaled nearly 9,000 men when it left Moscow in February of 1916 and arrived in Marseille in April of the same year. Other units soon followed. General Alexei Brusilov, who was commander of the Russian Southwest Front from March of 1916, was responsible for these brigades, which contributed a total of over 40,000 men to the Entente effort in the western and southern fronts of Europe. These more brigades were planned, but they were never formed because of the outbreak of the revolution in Russia. Here in France, the Russian units held the front of Champagne, while the French units were fighting at the Battle of Verdun. They occupied the Fort de la Pompelle near Reims. Following heavy losses during the Second Battle of the Aisne in April of 1917, they took Courcy and the Fort of Brimo, while the 1st and 3rd Russian brigades were serving in the French 7th Army Corps. The casualties for just those two brigades during the offensive amounted to over 4,500 men killed, wounded, or missing in action. Now, that same month, news of the February Revolution started to reach the Russian soldiers in France. At first, these reports were kept secret by their officers as best they could, but by the 12th of April, the news became official and there was no hiding it any longer. 4 days later, the 2nd Brigade lost over 4,000 casualties killed and wounded. And so, following the example of their comrades, hundreds of miles away back home, soldiers of the Russian Expeditionary Force rejected their officers and elected soldier committees. At one meeting, the committee representatives made an appeal to their fellow soldiers to refuse any further drilling since they weren't going to continue fighting. These rebellious units were considered dangerous and a revolutionary influence, and so they were ordered to Salonika. They refused, demanding to be sent home to Russia instead. With this, the military representatives of the provisional government on the 25th of August 1917 ordered loyal troops to vacate the camp, leaving only those soldiers who said that they would submit conditionally to the provisional government, if allowed to return to Russia. Now, on September 14th, French and Russian commanders isolated the rebel camp, placing the occupants on half rations and lining the surrounding roads with a mixture of French and reliable Russian troops and guns. Now, on the 15th of September of 1917, the remaining revolutionary soldiers, which numbered about 2,000, were ordered to lay down their arms by 10 a.m. on the 16th of September or be destroyed. The rebels refused, and at 10 a.m., the encircling force actually fired upon the camp with a French artillery piece. After a little bit of fire had reduced their numbers, the majority of those Russian soldiers who had been rebellious were surrendered and arrested. By 9 o'clock on September 16th, the camp was completely occupied by French forces and the mutineers were disarmed. The casualties had been exclusively among the Russian mutineers. None of the opposing forces were killed. A total of 9 mutineers were killed and 49 were wounded in what amounted to a mini civil war on the Western Front. The Russians were first sent to prison camps in North Africa and in France. And after several months, many of them were sent back to Russia, while others were integrated into French society and remained here for the rest of their lives. As for the men who died on the Western Front as a part of the Russian Expeditionary Force, they were brought here to Saint-Hilaire-le-Grand, where this Russian cemetery was established. Later, the survivors of the Russian brigades who fought here established a Russian Orthodox chapel in memory of the over 4,000 members of the REF who were killed on the Western Front. There are 489 men buried here in these individual graves, which you see behind me. And then in the back of the cemetery, there are an additional 426 in 2 ossuaries. You can do the math. That's less than 1,000, which means that the vast majority of the 4,000 Russian troops who died on the Western Front have never been